an island that was the site of the deadliest crocodile attack in history, with hundreds of soldiers being mauled by the animals in World War II. One of the most radioactive islands in the world, and an island teeming with deadly sharks and more radioactive waste. These are some of the most dangerous islands that even scientists are warned to stay away from. Ramree Island is known for two things: massive saltwater crocodiles and a horrific battle during World War II. Sitting off the coast of Burma, this huge swampy island is full of venomous scorpions, malaria-carrying mosquitoes, and, of course, crocs. Quite the recipe for disaster. And in 1945, it was. Early that year, during a battle with the Allied forces, the Japanese troops holding the island made a huge mistake. They decided to retreat through the swamp. Many of them never made it out alive. These crocs, some of the largest in the world, are known to be highly aggressive and deadly. As the Japanese soldiers ran through the swamp trying to get to the other side of the island, they weren't just up against the threat of the Allied troops behind them. Instead, they found themselves under attack by the massive reptiles. And we're not talking about one or two crocs. There were thousands of them. The Allied soldiers just stood there, listening to the sounds of soldiers being devoured. One Allied commander later wrote, "That night was the most horrible that any member of the motor launch crews ever experienced. The scattered rifle shots in the pitch black swamp, punctured by the screams of wounded men crushed in the jaws of huge reptiles, and the blurred worrying sound of spinning crocodiles made a cacophony of hell that has rarely been duplicated on Earth." At dawn, the vultures arrived to clean up what the crocodiles had left. Of about 1,000 Japanese soldiers that entered the swamps of Ramree, only about 20 were found alive. This is widely considered the largest animal attack on humans in history. The incident became known as the Ramree Island Crocodile Massacre. It even showed up in the 1968 Guinness Book of World Records as the, quote, most human fatalities in a crocodile attack. Next up is Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands. This place isn't just infamous for being a remote, hard-to-reach island, it's also been the site of over 20 nuclear bomb tests carried out by the United States. Nuclear radiation, that's what I want on my next tropical island vacation. The US used the island for tests from 1946 to 1958, with a lot of the tests being conducted above ground, resulting in massive radioactive contamination. In fact, the atoll is still uninhabitable thanks to the lingering radiation. If you ate the coconuts here, you'd be swallowing dangerous doses of radiation. This is not an island you'd want to be shipwrecked on. What's really sad is that people used to call this place home too, but they were forced out to make way for the tests. They're still waiting for their homes to be declared safe for return, but that's probably never gonna happen. This place is banned to the public, and for good reason. The nuclear fallout and the toxic environment make it one of the most dangerous places to be. Bouvet Island is one of the most isolated islands on Earth. It's a tiny uninhabited place sitting in the South Atlantic Ocean, and its location is so remote that getting there is practically impossible. It's covered by ice, and if you even somehow made it there, you'd be up against constant freezing winds and harsh conditions. Sure, you may not have dangerous animals to deal with here, but in terms of weather and the conditions of the place itself, it's about as hostile as it gets. Jagged cliffs, glaciers, freezing waters. Not exactly a vacation spot, and there's literally nothing of value on this island. No resources, no native wildlife, no real reason to show up except for the thrill of setting foot on the most isolated island in the world. Not many people even know about Bouvet Island. The Norwegian government claims it as a dependency, but no one lives there and no one really is allowed to visit other than the occasional scientist. Now let's talk about the Farallon Islands, located just off the coast of San Francisco. These islands are so dangerous they've earned the nickname the Devil's Teeth, and trust me, they're just as terrifying as they sound. The waters around the islands are filled with treacherous shoals that can rip boats apart, and you do not want to be shipwrecked here. The seas around the islands are also home to sharks, and lots of them. The place is famous, or I guess infamous rather, for being a feeding ground for great whites, which make it a total death trap for anyone crazy enough to swim here. And if sharks weren't enough, there's also radioactive waste. What a combo. Back in the 40s and 50s, the US dumped thousands of barrels of radioactive waste into the ocean near the islands, and today it's estimated that nearly 48,000 barrels of radioactive material are still leaking into the waters surrounding the Farallons. So not only do you have great white sharks, lurking around, they're also radioactive. Ever heard of Heard Island in the southern Indian Ocean? It's another place on the don't even think about visiting list. It's cold, and it's covered in glaciers and volcanic mountains. It's one of the harshest climates on Earth, with winds so strong they can knock you off your feet, and the weather is totally unpredictable. That's not even the worst part though. The island is home to an active volcano, Big Ben, which has been known to erupt, spewing lava and ash into the air. Even if you're into exploring extreme environments, you're better off just staying away from here. The terrain is incredibly dangerous. Glaciers, rocky cliffs, icy waters, it just makes this place one that could easily swallow you up. And if that doesn't scare you off, the isolation of Heard Island should. It's so remote that if something goes wrong, help is a long way away. No rescue teams, no phone signals, just you, the volcano, and the vast ocean around you. So good luck with that. North Sentinel Island is probably one of the most dangerous places on Earth, for anyone who isn't a local, that is. It's found in the Andaman Islands, and it's home to the indigenous Sentinelese people, one of the last remaining uncontacted tribes in the world. The tribe is extremely hostile to outsiders, and has been known to shoot arrows at anyone who tries to approach. The Indian government has rightfully made it illegal to visit the island, and they're very strict about enforcing this law. Not just for the safety of anyone who tries to get too close, but for the Sentinelese as well. The Sentinelese have lived on the island for thousands of years without contact with the outside world, and they prefer to keep it that way. Any attempt to make contact with them has ended in violence, and if anyone were to introduce germs that the Sentinelese aren't familiar with, which they likely wouldn't be with how cut off they are from the rest of the world, it could totally wipe them out, which is another reason why the island is off limits. Let's shift gears and talk about North Brother Island, which sits right in the East River of New York City. You might think it's close to civilization, which makes it safe, and that may be partially true, but it also has a very dark history and is now completely off limits. It used to house Riverside Hospital, which was built in the late 1800s to treat contagious diseases like smallpox and tuberculosis. At one point, it was even home to the infamous Typhoid Mary, the woman who was blamed for spreading the disease throughout the city. She was quarantined here to prevent further outbreaks. On top of that, the island was the site of a horrible tragedy in 1905 when a steamship caught fire near the island. Over 1,000 people died. The island itself fell into disrepair over the years and was abandoned after the hospital closed in 1963. Today, it's been left to rot, with overgrown vegetation taking over the abandoned buildings. Wildlife now rules the island, and it's a far cry from the bustling city that surrounds it. It's eerie, empty, and supposedly it's haunted. Now, even if that's enticing to you, good luck visiting. It's very rare that anyone is allowed to set foot here. Snake Island is an island off the coast of Brazil. The Brazilian government has made it illegal to visit the island, and for very good reason. It's home to one of the deadliest species of snakes in the world, the golden lancehead pit viper. The venom of these snakes is extremely potent, and it's been known to cause rapid paralysis and even death. The only people who are allowed on the island are government scientists studying the snakes, and even then, they have to be extremely careful. The island is so dangerous that people who have tried to venture there without permission have often ended up seriously injured or dead. Surtsey Island off the southern coast of Iceland is a volcanic island that's only been around for 62 years. It started to form in 1963 after an underwater eruption, and ever since it popped out of the sea, scientists have been interested in it. Of course they have, it's a brand new island, but it's totally off limits to everyone else. Only a handful of researchers are allowed to visit, and they have to adhere to some very strict rules. By the time the eruption stopped, plant life had already started to form here. First it was just moss. Birds also started showing up. Then in 1977, something pretty funny and very strange happened. Scientists found a potato plant growing there, but it turned out some teens from a nearby island had planted it as a joke. A little later, a scientist had to do a number 2 outside, and well, let's just say he left behind something that a tomato plant ended up sprouting out from. The potatoes and tomatoes were quickly removed, and the people involved got into some trouble for bringing foreign plants to the island. Finally, we've got Gruinard Island, which sits off the coast of Scotland. This place is infamous for being used as a testing ground for biological weapons during the Second World War. The British government tested anthrax on the island, and the contamination was so severe that the island was uninhabitable for decades. It wasn't until the 80s that the British government finally managed to decontaminate the island, but even still, would you ever want to go here? Plenty of other places to go where there isn't even the slightest risk of anthrax infection, and those are the places I would much rather be. All that said, I've been your host, James. I will catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video.